please respond with a here when I call out their name. Commissioner Doan,
Here.
Commissioner Duggan,
Here.
Commissioner Lysick,
Here.
Commissioner Sanders.
Here.
I will now close the regular session of the board and will convene an executive session. Will this recorder please read the executive session script?
Certainly, an executive session of the board is called under ORS 192.6602H to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation.
Sam, can you hold on a second? We're having problems with the volume.
Okay.
Okay, Sam, give it a go.
Check 1, 2. Is that any better? Hello,
Much.
hello.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I shall repeat. An executive session of the board is called under ORS 192.6602H to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed, and 192.6602F to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. We'll now meet in executive session.
Sam, are you ready for us?
Yes, I am.
I will now reconvene our regular board meeting, and we will proceed with a proclamation in honor of Budget Committee John Villaraski. John, would you please come forward? The Tualatin Valley Water District Board of Commissioners and the staff wish to acknowledge and honor your dedicated service to the district. John has served the Tualatin Valley Water as Budget Committee member for 22 years and has used his experience and dedication to serve as an engaged Budget Committee member in his drive to ensure quality water and service to our community. Wonderful. Thank you for your service, John. I think Paul wants to get a photo.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure working with you all.
Thank you very much.
The next item for consideration is a resolution adopting the 2025-27 biennium budget and making appropriations. May we have the staff report, please, Justin?
Thank you, President Fisher. Good evening, Commissioners. Before I start, I also want to thank John for his service over the years. I really appreciate all the effort that you've put in to all these extensive meetings and time and your commitment. And as I told you after the last meeting, don't be surprised if you hear from me again sometime shortly as things start to wrap up. Can I go with you? Thank you. So tonight I'll be presenting the 25-27 biennial budget staff report for adoption. Tonight's presentation will consist of highlights of the budget process, a summary of our strategic plan, and details of the approved 25-27 biennial budget, everybody's favorite part, I know, and then just some closing remarks and recommendations. This is a slide everybody should be pretty familiar with this at this stage of the process. We are in the final stage, the fourth stage of the Oregon local budget process, so the budget adoption. We presented the requested and proposed budgets to the budget committee and received an approval from that body, and then now it is up to the board for adoption this evening and making appropriations for starting next fiscal year through the biennium. To date, we've had these public meetings. So we had our budget committee tour on April 4th, our first budget committee workshop on April 10th, followed by our second on the 30th, our formal budget committee meeting on May 28th, and then tonight's regular board meeting focusing on the adoption phase. Reminder, just the principal issues that we sort of built the budget around and what went into our strategic planning process. We're completing the Willamette water supply system, integrating the new WWSS into the district's operations, managing our critical partnerships, and assisting customers with the affordability of water. We've heard our CEO, Mr. Matthews, talk about the big three priorities, and those are still a continuation as a theme in this next biennial budget. So we'll first and foremost continue providing quality water and service to our community, because without them, none of the other things are part of the picture. We'll successfully complete the construction and integration of the Willamette water supply system into the district's operations. And then an ongoing project that we've been working on from prior biennium and continuing forward is normalizing the operations with the business processes of our customer information system. So we still got some work ongoing with that effort. The strategic initiatives that we went through in the workshop number 2. So I'm not going to read through these in detail, but we have 17 initiatives that the leadership team has come up with as priorities for the next biennium. And so we will continue to monitor and report on these activities as the biennium progresses. And for the last several years, or biennia actually, you've heard the message being that TVWD is an organization in transition, whereas this biennia, the topic is we're completing that transition. So early in our history, we've had this role as a suburban water provider, and then we started progressing into the planning of the WWSS and then the construction of the WWSS. And so that has really been an underlying theme of our budgets for the last 4 or 5 biennia. And now we're at the phase where we're actually going to be completing the construction efforts and transitioning into operations and transitioning as an organization into our role as a regional operator for the transmission system and the managing agency for these new joint ventures with the WWSS and the Willamette intake facilities. And with that, I'll proceed into going through the details of the approved budget by fund. So this is a requirement of Oregon local budget law. So as a reminder, we appropriate at the level of by fund and by appropriation category. Examples are personnel services, materials services, capital outlay, et cetera. So we'll go through each of those funds. Before doing so, just to provide a quick overview of the status of the budget, comparing the 23-25 biennial adopted budget to our 25-27 approved budget. You can see those themes that we've talked about come through in the numbers pretty clearly here as we transition away from the capital investment cycle and towards operations. So we're seeing decreases in appropriations as it relates to our capital outlay and the transfers necessary to account for those things, and increases in the operating costs as it relates to supporting the operating efforts of the WWSS. Our first fund, the general fund, where all of our operating activities take place, or most of our operating activities take place and are accounted for. So within the personal services fund, we have a budget of 8.9 million. Excuse me, the personal services appropriation category. For materials and services, 8.4 million. I'm sorry, I'm reading the changes. I apologize. 59 million. That sounds more accurate. 74.5 million for materials and services, 462,000 for capital outlay. As a reminder, the capital outlay in the general fund is only for those small equipment purchases. So for example, we have some meter reading devices that we're going to replace. We have some IT hardware that we're going to place. The majority of our capital budget is contained within our capital improvement project, or our capital improvement plan fund. And then special payments. So these are the payments that we pass from our customers onto the agencies that impose a right-of-way fee on the district. So the cities of Beaverton, Tigard, and Hillsborough have a system where they recover their right-of-way fees through our billing for customers that reside within those cities. And so it's a pass-through expenditure where the customer pays the fee on the bill, and then we pass it on to those entities. And so we budget for that as a special payment. And then interfund transfers. So these are transfers out of the general fund into either our debt service payment fund or our capital reserve fund. And then finally, a contingency category. So 2.2 million for special payments, 156.8 million for transfers, and 20 million for general operating contingency. The key amounts of the fund will continue to build capacity for our operations on the WWSS, as well as investing in our capital reserve fund for future capital outlays and providing sufficient transfers to pay for the debt service associated with our 2023 and 2024 bond funds in this biennium. The WIFIA bond payments won't be online until 2028. Our next fund, Capital Improvement Fund, is budgeted at 210.9 million. So this includes the joint venture activities associated with the WWSS, as well as our in-district projects and fleet replacements. And there are some costs associated with the Metzger Pipeline East project. So that's a project that's, from all intents and purposes, wrapping up here. But there's some trailing costs associated with how we account for our overhead on that pipeline. And so those will continue through the biennium, even when the work has reached substantial completion. Our capital reserve fund is where we basically our savings account, where we store reserves for future capital expenditures, as well as transferring money out of the capital reserve fund to pay for current period CIP. The budget in that fund is 203.6 million of interfund transfers. You can see the resources there coming from beginning balance, as well as interest income, meter sales, and transfers from our general fund into the fund. And then we anticipate a unappropriated ending funding balance in that fund of 173.7 million. And that would be going towards future capital outlay in our long-term CIP. Our system development charges fund, we are appropriating 7.2 million of transfers. So this is the fund where we receive the payments for our system development charges, and then we transfer those out to our capital improvement fund, and we account for the use of those SDC funds as we use them to invest in our CIP. Our grant proceeds fund is estimated at 12.7 million for the 25-27 biennium of fund transfers. So in this fund, we account for the grant proceeds that we receive. Right now, we're looking at just the one federal grant associated with our Taylor's Ferry project, and then we transfer those funds back to the capital reserve fund to reimburse it for the expenditures. Our debt service fund is 16.4 million. So this is the interest payments on the 23-24 bonds that I mentioned. We don't have any interest payments on our Whitfield loan. That's deferred until 2028. In 2028, we'll also begin principal payments on those revenue bonds that I mentioned above. And our customer emergency assistance fund. So this is materials and services appropriation of 400,000. And then, as I mentioned during the budget committee meeting, that we did create a contingency line item for this fund in the future. So the board could easily transfer in the event that as we reach the end of the biennium, if we were in a situation where we didn't have adequate appropriations, we could easily just do a single contingency transfer within the fund for 60,000. A reminder, the Customer Emergency Assistance Fund, it's to provide limited relief for customers who qualify. So these are one-time emergency assistance contributions. This is separate from our overall customer assistance program, and that's actually part of our materials and services costs within the customer service department. And our director, Andrew Carlstrom, provided information on that during the workshops. We're almost through. Our Willamette River Water Coalition Fund. So this is a joint venture with the cities of Sherwood, Tigard, and Tualatin, where we serve as the managing agency. There's a reminder that the joint ventures themselves adopt the first year of the budget, and then we take that and incorporate it into our budget and then make estimates for the second year. So the second year is an estimate, but if additional appropriations are needed in the second year, we would come back to this body for that information. So far, we haven't been in that situation, but we do consider that in the budget development process. So we have a materials and services of 309, roughly 310,000, as well as a contingency of 31,000. Our second largest fund, the Willamette Water Supply System Fund, has a materials and services category of 28.3 million and a capital outlay category of 221 million, and then a contingency of 2.8 million. So you can see from the change column, as we've talked about throughout this process, significant change from being the construction phase, so the capital outlay number decreasing substantially, and then transitioning to operations. So we're seeing a large increase in the materials and services as the system comes online and begins to provide water to the partners. And then lastly, the Willamette Intake Facilities Commission has a budget appropriations of 1.2 million in materials and services, 114,000 in capital outlay, and 114,000 in contingency. So this is the joint venture with the cities of Beaverton, Hillsborough, Sherwood, and Tigard, and Wilsonville. That is the infrastructure down in Wilsonville where the water is brought into the system and then separates out. Some of it goes to the Willamette Water Supply System, and then the rest goes to the Wilsonville Sherwood treatment plant that is already in Wilsonville. So in summary, the approved 25-27 budget will help get us to a completion stage within the WWSS. It funds the strategic initiatives that we brought forward to the board for adoption. It maintains a strong financial position that the district is currently in, and it will expand financial support for vulnerable customers and continue to fund critical infrastructure needs within the district. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
Is there anyone for public comment, Sam?
I thought you were speaking, but I couldn't hear you. There is nobody online, and it sounds like there is nobody in the room.
Well, then I will now close the public hearing. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the 1225 resolution for the budget making appropriations for the Tualatin Valley Water District for 25-27 biennium?
This is Jim Doan, so moved.
This is Commissioner Lysick. I second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes. Now we'll move into
Thank you.
reports by the CEO.
Good evening, President Fisher and Commissioners. Tonight's announcement is going to be very quick because we have a long agenda. Real quick, just to remind you that tomorrow is Juneteenth, and following the new state and federal holiday, TVWD's offices will be closed. We will be back on Friday. And as always, customers can reach us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by calling our main number, 503-848-3000, for any emergencies they might encounter. It's public outreach season. I think you heard this from our communication director, Justin Dyke, who had to be away tonight for a family matter. But our next customer outreach event will be held Thursday, June 26th from 6:30 until 8:30 during THPRD's summer kickoff concert. So we do this pretty much every year. It's a kickoff for that season. Staff looks forward to connecting further with the community. We provide drinking water at that event, and we share information. This year, of course, we're going to be talking a lot about the WWSS and the upcoming integration. Because of the length of tonight's business agenda, we've deferred the director's report till next month. So with that, that concludes the CEO announcements.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Let's see, there's tonight's meeting. There was a work session on the 2nd, and there was a meeting I had with Paul Matthews the day before.
Commissioner Duggan.
On the 28th of May, I attended the Metro Impact meeting where they discussed housing issues in the metro area and selection of the locally preferred alternative for 82nd Avenue Transit Project. Also on the 28th, we had our budget committee meeting. On the 2nd of June, I had a meeting with Paul Matthews. On the 3rd, we had our board work session. On the 4th, I attended the Regional Water Providers Consortium Board meeting, which is our regular 1/3 of year meeting, where the primary business was electing a new chair and officers and approving the staffing IGA with the city of Portland for the consortium. On the 5th of June, I attended the Willamette Water Supply System Board meeting, where we had an in-person meeting for the first time in a year. And we also had an executive session. On the 9th, I attended the Washington County Public Affairs Forum, where Mayor Lacey Beatty of Beaverton talked about her years of service and her lessons learned for the course of her public service and the transition in government at the city of Beaverton. On the 10th, I attended the Washington County CPO #1 meeting, where Lindsay Walknock of our staff gave a presentation on our water line replacement projects, updates on that. We also had an update from ODOT on the 217 widening project, and developers talked about various developments that they're planning here in the vicinity. And then tonight's meetings.
Commissioner Lysick.
On May 28th, I attended the budget committee meeting. On the 3rd, our work session. On the 4th, my monthly touch base with CEO Matthews. On the 12th, OGEC Public Meetings Law webinar training. On the 13th, board agenda discussion with CEO Matthews, and tonight's meeting.
Commissioner Sanders.
Thank you, President Fisher. This is going to sound very familiar. CEO meeting on the 27th, budget meeting on the 28th, board work session on June 3rd, CEO meeting on June 4th, board agenda planning meeting on June 5th, June 10th, WRWC board meeting with Tiger, Tualatin, and Sherwood. So I had to make it a little bit longer there. Also had a meeting with our COO on the 9th, discussing a meeting that we had this morning with the Joint Water Commission Executive Committee, talking about the contract for the chlorine production steps that will be taking place out at Fern Hill. Is that the right name for it? Fern Hill. At Fern Hill, where they will ultimately be changing over to a different chlorine type for mostly safety reasons. And then tonight's meeting, and a potential for also perhaps production of chlorine down the road, but that's not part of this current plan. On site, yeah.
Well, I attended several of those meetings as well, but the ones that I specifically attended that haven't been listed yet were on the May 27th. I met with Wendy Kroger, who used to be on the THPRD board, to discuss some parks and trails issues and TVWD's work along Shoals Ferry. On the 28th of May, I attended virtually a Vera Action workshop to learn about community policing issues. On the 4th of June, I attended virtually a workshop that AWA puts on quarterly. I guess I've learned about federal policy updates on PFAS. And then from the 7th to the 12th, along with several TVWD staffers, I was at the AWA ACE conference in Denver, which was very fascinating. And then did my bi-monthly check-in with our CEO on the 17th. And then the agenda planning meeting on the 5th. And then on the 18th, tonight's meeting. To topics to be raised by commissioners. Do we have any topics to be raised? Seeing none. Moving into public comment. Still no public comment in the room. And Sam, has anybody else joined?
Not seeing any.
Okay, well then we will move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are considered to be routine and may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Any board member may request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. Any items requested to be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion will be considered immediately after the board has approved those items which do not require discussion. There's our consent agenda.
This is Todd Sanders. I move to accept the consent agenda as listed.
This is Commissioner Lysak. I second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, the motion passes. We'll now move into our business agenda. And Justin Carlton, welcome back.
Thank you, President Fisher and commissioners. So tonight we're bringing forward a proposed budget adjustment for the 23-25 biennium. I know it's fun to live in 4-year horizons, but as we reach the end of the budget cycle, we do a lot of review of the transaction details and kind of clean up some things that need to just be finely tuned before we start getting into audit season and reporting out all the end of the fiscal year activity. So just a reminder, the difference between supplemental budget versus budget adjustment resolution. So what we're proposing tonight is a budget adjustment resolution. So we've done this a couple times. This was similar to what we did last November. And so we'll talk about the reasons for the proposed changes and then the specific changes themselves. So a supplemental budget process is governed under ORS 294-305 to 294-565. It's similar to any budget. It requires the resources and requirements be balanced. And if a fund expenditures change by more than, the changes exceeds 10% or new appropriation category is created, it does require a public hearing and has specific public notices. There's exceptions to local budget law, so that's the instance that we're proposing this change. And so transfers of appropriation authority from one fund to another or between appropriation categories within the same fund with that equal no net change can be done by resolution. And so that's what we're proposing tonight. The specific changes that we're proposing, the first one is related to the SDC fund. So the good news here is we had SDC revenues in excess of what we budgeted this year. You may recall that when we did an actual supplemental budget and created the SDC fund, we moved those out of our capital reserve fund where all the money just kind of lived in one place. And now we actually have to move it from the SDC fund back to the capital reserve fund. And so because we appropriated the estimated revenues, we'll have a potential fund balance that will roll over at the end of the year. So right now we're a little close to around $1 million over on the revenue side. And so what we're proposing is increasing the appropriations in that fund so we can go ahead and move as much of that as possible back to the reserve fund, do the accounting for that in this fiscal year, and that'll reduce the amount of fund balance that will roll over into the next biennium. And then we'll continue to monitor that in the next biennium and make adjustments as needed. The second change that we're proposing is some additional appropriations that are needed in the debt service fund for the 2024 bonds. And so what happened there is we had an estimate for what the total interest payment would be for the year based on the first interest payment of the year, not accounting for some additional accrued interest that was going to happen. And so we need to increase appropriations there to fully account for the debt service payment on those bonds. Looking at the changes holistically, what we're proposing is taking appropriations from the 2024 bond fund. So we initially appropriated, we actually started at 120 million and then we reduced it to 117 with the last resolution transfer. So we have extra capacity there. So we're proposing just taking it from that fund. And so it would be a reduction of 1.192 million in that fund, and then it would increase the appropriations in our transfers out category in the SDC fund by 190,000, and then our revenue bond debt service fund by 302,000, so netting out to zero. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you have regarding the proposed changes. This will be the last budget thing I bring to you for months, I promise. That staff recommends the board adopt resolution 1325, adopting changes to the 23-25 biennial budget.
Do I have a motion?
I'm sorry, my brain is too slow. Does that account for any SDCs we incur in the month of May and June?
So what we're able to do because of the 10% rule, so let me kind of go back to the numbers here. The initial fund was budgeted at 8.9 million. So the maximum amount I can do by resolution is 890,000. So that will give us a large chunk of the revenues that have come in. It doesn't account for what because June is not closed yet, so we'll still get some more revenues. So we will have a fund balance that'll roll over, but then we'll monitor that against what we plan for in the next biennium. And then as the biennium progresses, if we wind up in a similar situation, we'll come back to the board and do a similar resolution where we'll go ahead and move excess funds over at that time.
You're smart. Thank you.
Do I have a motion?
This is Todd Sanders. I move.
This is Commissioner Lysak. I second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you very much.
To item B. Approval of the district's 2025-27 financial plan with, again, Justin Carlton.
Thank you. So tonight's discussion is bringing forward the proposed financial plan, and in that what the key assumptions and key results are, as well as a staff recommendation. You'll recall that our financial management process has these key milestones. And so it starts with the strategic initiatives development. And then from that, we bring forward financial strategies to the board. So the strategic initiatives were presented to the board and adopted. And then in March, we presented the financial strategies that served sort of as the core financial basis for the budget development phase. We now have a adopted budget for the 23-25 biennium, and then that feeds our longer term financial plans. So all these things sort of tied together on what it is that we're going to accomplish, how we're going to fund it, what our spending plan is for the next 2 years, and then what does that look like for the larger picture of our financial plan over the next 10 to 30 years. And it all culminates with the rate process later this summer. So we're at the financial plan stage now where the plan has been developed. It's incorporated the budget as well as the adopted strategies. And so we're bringing that forward for consideration of approval for the board tonight. The reasons why we have a financial plan, so it really helps ensure our strategic focus beyond that 2-year horizon, creates accountability for the district over a longer period of time, helps inform stakeholders about what we're doing. So obviously the utility business is a very long horizon in terms of what we plan and execute. And so it lets people that within and outside the agency know what it is that we're aiming for over the long term. And it demonstrates the district's commitment to sound financial management. So as I mentioned, internal and external stakeholders are interested in this information. We actually just had a meeting this afternoon with some folks where we said, oh, you should look at our financial plan. And so it really does help outside audiences understand what our longer term strategies are. It also gives information to rating agencies in terms of how to evaluate our credit worthiness, as well as it's a document that we supply to the WIFIA program as well. The board approval process is a critical element to this, so we ask that the board approve the requested as our financial management policies state. The board approval process is part of that. It also demonstrates your role as being fiduciaries of the district's finances and your role in providing financial oversight. And then approval rather than an adoption differentiates. So this is one I've always got a little hung up on. So you're adopting the approval, but it really just clarifies that this is a guidance document. So this is not necessarily a policy document that we have to adhere to all the strict elements of it, but provides information for us in terms of how we operate on a longer term basis. And then the rate process is a separate process that is sort of the culmination of all these financial management activities. The assumptions that went into the financial plan is first and foremost, we're going to adhere to our financial management policies around our coverage ratios, our target net leverage ratios. And so all those are incorporated into the financial plan. It assumes no additional debt issuance. So we've completed our financing program for the Willamette, and so we have no anticipated debt issuance in the near, long, or medium term. It does include an assumption around customer growth. So current year assumes a 5% rate of growth in the fiscal 26, slowly declining 0.5% per year until we reach 0% growth in 2036. And then it assumes our operating and maintenance costs as well as our capital costs will continue to escalate at a rate of 4.5% annually beyond what we have budgeted in the 25-27 biennium. In summary, you can see what our total costs look like for operating and capital over the next 10 years. So substantial capital outlay investment continue on as we complete the Willamette in the early terms, and then starting to steady out until the later part of the 10-year horizon where we have some additional investments in things like our AMI program and some other renewal and replacements within the district. On the revenue side, obviously our revenues need to balance our requirements. And so you can see the different resources, primarily water sales with declining SDC revenues anticipated as that growth rate continues to tick down based on our assumption. And then our other revenues tend to stabilize around what were our assumptions for contributions from the partners on the Willamette supply system for our role as the managing agency there. And then as well as our reserves and our current investments that we anticipate funding the investment in the Willamette.
Justin?
Yes.
Previous slide. I noticed this earlier. The 2027 SDC and grants goes from 9.7 in 26 to 13.5 in 27. I just wondered what it was.
That's primarily driven by how we spread the grant revenue associated with the Taylor's Ferry project.
Okay, thank you.
It's a good question. Thank you. Looking at a graph of the customer impacts and the assumed rate increases, so we can see the bars represent the typical bill. So starting a little above $100 per month for the typical bill based on 7 CCFs on a monthly basis, and then increasing based on a 3% growth rate on an annual basis, as was adopted in the financial strategy back in March. And numerically looking at the same value, so you can see the proposed rate adjustments based on the financial strategy, and then those resulting impacts for the typical bill between 2026 and 2020 or 2035, excuse me.
Justin, I've got a quick
Yes.
just a request for future presentations. When we talk about the typical bill, I would appreciate seeing a representation of what a discounted bill looks like as well. I think it's a good opportunity for us to then also just have a spot where we get to see historically how the customer growth in that program changes. So anytime we're talking about a typical bill, centering the discussion around that piece as well.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Commissioner. We can make that adjustment in future presentations. So the next steps in the financial process are once we've received approval from the board, we will update Appendix A of our financial management policies based on the rate assumptions. And then we will transition to our rate setting process, as I mentioned, which will start with a proposed process or proposed calendar for the process that we'll bring forward to the board at our July regular board meeting. With that, I'm happy to address any other questions or comments regarding the financial plan. Wise staff does recommend the board adopt resolution 1425, approving the district's financial plan for 25-27.
Seeing no questions, do I have a motion?
This is Jim Dolan, so moved.
This is Commissioner Duggan, second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you.
Due to the long agenda, I would like to allow the board and staff to take a 5-minute recess at this time. If anyone requires a short break? Okay, I guess we'll move forward then. Let's see, I will now call the Tualatin Valley Water District Local Contract Review Board to order. Start with a presentation by Andrew Carlson.
All right. Thank you, President Fisher and Board of Commissioners in your LCRB function. I have 2 items for you tonight to LCRB actions. They're both contract-specific exemptions. The first is for utility billing, printing, and mailing services, what we also call bill print. This is for the provider Metro Presort Incorporated. So just to review the local contract review board rules that are pertinent, Division 120 of the LCRB rules allow for special procurements to be exempt from competitive bidding with the approval of the board, provided certain circumstances exist. 1, the special procurement is unlikely to encourage favoritism in the awarding of a public contract or substantially diminishes competition for public contracts. And 2, results in substantial cost savings to the district or to the public. Or 3, substantially promotes the public interest in a manner that could not be realized through competitive bidding methods. So getting into the specifics of this proposed exemption, staff believe that by entering into a new 5-year agreement with Metro Presort, the district promotes the public interest due to the following. 1, this will support district focus on normalizing operations and business processes with a customer information system, or CIS, by deferring a major meter to cash change. And it would be a major change to go to a new provider at this time. Number 2, Metro Presort was selected via request for proposals in 2019 and was the sole responsive proposer. And 3, TVWD intends to competitively solicit for utility billing, printing, and mailing services after CIS normalization work is complete. So with that, staff recommended action is that the board, acting as the local contract review board, adopt resolution number 15-25, approving a contract-specific exemption for Metro Presort Incorporated for utility billing, printing, and mailing services for Tualatin Valley Water District.
This is Todd Sanders. I move to accept resolution 15-25.
This is Commissioner Lysick. I second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, motion passes.
All right, moving on to the second LCRB action. This again is another contract-specific exemption. This one is for project management services, and the provider is RCC Global LLC. Again, there are pertinent local contract review board rules. I'm not going to read them since I just did for the other exemption, but I'll just take a moment for you to review them again. In terms of the specifics, staff believe that by amending the agreement with RCC Global LLC, the district will promote the public interest due to the following. 1, this will support district focus on normalizing operations and business processes with the Customer Information System, or CIS, by continuing to provide project management and related services. 2, TVWD has just completed implementation of one of 2 major planned CIS upgrades, and the district expects to implement the second upgrade before the end of calendar year 2025. And 3, external expertise and additional time are needed for the second planned CIS upgrade. RCC Global LLC is currently providing this external expertise primarily in the form of a project manager. So with that, staff recommended action is that the board, acting as the local contract review board, adopt resolution number 16-25, approving a contract-specific exemption for RCC Global LLC, doing business as Red Clay, for project management for services for the Tualatin Valley Water District.
This is Commissioner Lysick. I move that the board adopt resolution number 1625.
It's Commissioner Duggan, second.
I have a motion and it's been seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion passes. I will now adjourn the Tualatin Valley Water District Local Contract Review Board and return to your regular TVWD business meeting.
Well, good evening again, President Fisher and Commissioners. This will be a short report because you've seen this at a work session before, but we're here tonight to talk about a short-term contract with the City of Portland to help us in the event that we were delayed with the completion of the water supply system. There are actually 4 things that we're working with Portland on. The first is the short-term agreement, which is the subject of tonight's discussion. But we also need to be looking at 3 other items. First is those 3 items, the replacement of the wheeling agreement that we have with Portland. It's part of the regional water supply contract. So right now we have customers that we serve Portland water to that are actually Portland customers. And once we transition to Willamette, we will no longer be able to wheel Portland water to those customers. So we'll need a follow-on agreement with that. The second is the emergency regional supply agreements. We have a lot of shared infrastructure and interconnections with Portland. The regional supply system is stronger when we work together. We'll want to work with Portland on that agreement as well. And then the last item that we're interested in is the future of the Washington County supply line. The operation and maintenance expense associated with that pipeline is allocated based on how the old debt service was allocated. The debt has been fully repaid. And as we transition to the Willamette, our interest in the Washington County supply line will need to be addressed through that agreement. But tonight, we're focused on the first of these, which is an agreement that allows us to have temporary water from TVWD or from Portland to TVWD if unforeseen events prevent TVWD from receiving water from the WWSS by July 1, 2026. The agreement has recitals, and I'm not sure, I'd have to ask Clark if recitals are a section of the agreement, but we just say recitals. And then there are 6 sections. And I'll cover these very quickly. This information, though, the board was presented at its work session. So we're doing this in the public meeting, but it's information that you've already seen. The nature of the service, Portland will provide potable water to TVWD on a monthly basis. It will deliver it to our current locations, the turnouts that we already have in place, where we have the wholesale meters and vaults that are in the existing agreement that we have with Portland. Quality standards, Portland will meet all applicable drinking water regulations, regulatory requirements. Essentially, they're going to provide us the same water that they provide to their retail customers. We will request the provision of water, so TVWD may submit a written request for water by June 1st of 2026 if we forecast the need for that. Portland will respond to that by June 15th and may adjust or decline the request based on availability of supply. We're confident Portland has enough water between this Bull Run system and the Columbia South Shore well field, but this is nevertheless a provision of the agreement. Curtailment, it's very similar to the agreement that we have now, that there can be unforeseen circumstances that may limit Portland's ability to provide water to us. In that case, we may be curtailed delivery of water pursuant to Portland City Code Chapter 21-70 or .70. It's the same process that we have now under our current agreement. Payment terms, we'll pay monthly to Portland. We'll pay the bills within 30 days of receipt. And the rate that we will pay, it'll be based on the rate that we have actually right now, the one that Portland has adopted right now, increased by the average increase in Portland's wholesale rate. So Portland has transitioned at the conclusion of the regional water supply contract that will conclude on July 1, 2026. They've adopted a new methodology. So the rate's going to be different for all the wholesale customers. Because this is a short-term agreement, we agree with Portland, rather than trying to factor in TVWD's cost, we'll take the cost that we have right now and we'll increase it by the average increase in the rest of their wholesale customers' water rates. So this is going to be a fair way of doing it without spending a large amount of consulting dollars to calculate a rate that may or may not be around for a long period of time. Can't have an agreement without a dispute resolution clause. This is the standard dispute resolution clause that we see in all of our agreements. If there are questions about that, I'd direct them to Mr. Balfour. And then finally, our recommendation is that the board adopt Resolution 1725, a resolution approving the short-term water sales intergovernmental agreement between the Tualatin Valley Water District and the City of Portland. Are there any questions?
This is Commissioner Duggan. I move that we approve, we adopt Resolution 1725, a resolution approving the short-term water sales agreement between TVWD and the City of Portland.
This is Todd Sanders. I second.
Okay, motion has been called and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion passes. For the evening, Andrew.
All right, good evening again. This item is about extending the term of the intergovernmental agreement, the IGA, for joint billing services between TVWD and Clean Water Services. Just a reminder, TVWD and Clean Water Services have been joint billing since 1994. And the little screenshot you see there is actually from the 1994 agreement when CWS was the Unified Sewerage Agency of Washington County. So the current IGA, as it was amended in 2005, TVWD provides services to CWS for joint billing. TVWD invoices CWS for the cost of service. There were 3 5-year agreement renewals, and then the agreement itself expires on June 30th, 2025. Key points for this resolution. This would extend the current IGA for an additional 5-year term. It would be effective July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2030. And it will also authorize the chief executive officer to execute the amendment without further board action, as well as execute an interim letter of intent with Clean Water Services pending preparation of the amendment to the IGA. So staff recommended action is that the board adopt resolution 18-25, authoring the chief executive officer to execute an amendment to extend the term of the joint billing services intergovernmental agreement between Clean Water Services and the Tualatin Valley Water District.
Any questions from the board? We have a motion. I will ask for a motion. Second.
This is Jim Doan. I will move that we authorize an amendment to extend the term of the billing agreement another 5 years.
It's Todd Sanders, I second.
Okay, a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you for joining us for a wonderful evening.